ලංකාවේ පිළිගත් විශ්වවිද්‍යාලවල ඉගෙනුම ලබමින් සිටින සරසවි ශිෂ්‍යයන්ගේ පූර්ණ මාර්ගෝපදේශනය යටතේ ඉන්ඩිවිජුවල් හෝ ගෲප් ක්ලාස් එකක් ඔබත් කරගන්න කැමතිද? එක ශ්‍රේණිය සිට 13 ශ්‍රේණිය දක්වා ඕනෑම විෂයක් ඉංග්‍රීසි, සිංහල, දෙමළ ඕනෑම මාධ්‍යකින් ඔබේ හැකියා දක්ෂතා දුර්වලතා හොඳින් හඳුනාගෙන ඔබටම ගැලපෙන සුවිශේෂී ක්‍රමවේද ඔස්සේ ආසාවෙන් ඉගෙන ගන්න. දැන්ම අපිට කතා කරන්න 076 168 89 හැන්දෑවේ ඉස්කෝලේ හේන පෙන්වන්න නෙවෙයි පාර පෙන්වන්න.
Hello everyone, my name is Imasha and I'm very much excited to be a part of this teaching journey. Before moving on to our today's lesson, I'll be briefly introduce about myself. As I told you previously, I'm Imasha and I'm an undergraduate of General Sir John Kapalawala Defence University. I'm following Bachelor's of Science in Management and Technical Sciences. I did my advanced level in biology stream in English medium in 2021. So today I selected a really interesting lesson which is under the grade 8 science syllabus. The first lesson, which is the importance of microorganisms. If you have any questions or anything to be commented, feel free to comment, ask. So, as I previously mentioned, today's lesson is importance of microorganisms. And in today's lesson, we'll be talking about what are microorganisms and the effects of microorganisms on food and the impact of microorganisms on humans and their activities. So, before starting our lesson, I would like to ask you a question. Have you ever heard the term microorganisms? Probably you might, because we all have been through COVID-19 pandemic and you all are very much familiar about the term microorganisms and coronavirus as well. So coronavirus is also one of the microorganisms we are talking very much in detail. And microorganisms. What is microorganisms? I know in your previous grades, grade 6 and 7, you have heard about the term organisms. Organisms is any kind of living entity, living individual. So we can divide the organisms into two types as macroorganisms and microorganisms. Who are macroorganisms? Yes, macroorganisms are human, including animals and plants. Simply, the organisms that we can observe through our naked eye. Remember the term naked eye. And then today we are going to talk about microorganisms. So for the easiness, even though the term microorganisms comes as a single term, I would suggest you to break that term into two parts as micro and then organisms. Yes, organisms we are clear. We have learned. And then what is micro? Micro is very small, tiny. The term itself says that very small. So we have a good definition given in our textbook, that is the unicellular or single-celled. What is unicellular? If I draw it like, if suppose this is a cell, and if one cell is there, we call it as unicellular or single-celled. And it says that the unicellular, single-celled or multicellular organism. Multicellular. So here I have drawn a unicellular organism and there I have drawn multicellular organism. So now you know that unicellular means only one cell. Multicellular means there are many cells. The unicellular, single-celled or multicellular organisms which cannot be observed clearly by naked eye. If you want to study this definition, I would recommend you to break this definition into three major parts: unicellular, multicellular organisms, and then cannot be observed clearly by naked eye. What does it mean by naked eye? Naked eye means if you look around, if you look into your surrounding, you can see there are, for myself, I can see my table, my laptop, and my books on my table. So, but if I look at my table, look at my book, I can't see any microorganism. Only I can see the objects. Then it means that without having any support, what you can see through your eyes, that is the naked eye. We can't see microorganisms by our naked eye. If so, how can we observe microorganisms? We can observe microorganisms by what? Using microscopes. Microscopes. In previous grades, we have studied about light microscope. Light means we use light to observe through those microscope. And we have learned about hand lens. Do you think that using a hand lens, we can observe microorganisms? No, right? We only can share, we only can see, we can't see microorganisms through hand lens. Suppose that you can't see tiny letters on your book or a tiny insect on your on land, then you can use your hand lens and you can see them bigger. But you can't see microorganisms using a hand lens. Then you have to use a compound microscope as shown in this figure to observe microorganisms. Why we call this as a compound microscope? I know you know the answer, because we use two lenses to observe through this microscope. The place, I hope that you can see my cursor. The place we keep our eye, we call it as eyepiece, which is one of the lenses. And then the place which is closer to the object that we are observing, we call it as objective lens. So as this contains two lenses, we call it as a compound microscope, and this as a hand lens. Just one lens is there. Okay. So now we are going to do a really interesting activity to observe invisible living organisms. Shall I erase this? Okay. So, in order to observe the invisible living organisms, we are going to do really interesting activity. For this activity, we need what we need. As you can see, we need coconut water. And then we need glass slide and cover slip. And then the star of our activity, which is the light microscope or the compound microscope. So then we'll step by step, we'll see how can we observe these living invisible organisms. Simply the microorganisms. Okay. Method is we have to take some coconut water and put that coconut water into clean container. Why they have mentioned us that we have to use a clean container? which means that we have to use a container which do not contain any contaminants. That means there cannot be any dust particle or any other particle, because we are going to observe microorganisms. What will happen if there are any other particles? We can't observe that microorganisms clearly. So we have to get a clean container and put coconut water into that. And we have to keep the coconut water container for 3 days. For what? We are going to observe microorganisms. So if we just take coconut water and observe it through the microscope, we won't be able to clearly observe it. So we have to let the microorganisms to grow. That's why we are keeping it for 3 days. And then after 3 days, we get the coconut water container, and using a dropper, we take one drop and put it on the glass slide. I show you the glass slide. And you know about glass slides and cover slips. How we hold a glass slide? Do we hold it from the middle? No, we hold it from the corners or the sides. And holding it from the sides, we put a drop of coconut water onto it and cover it with a cover slip without trapping any what? Air bubbles. So how can we do that? We slant the cover slip on the glass slide and carefully, slowly cover it on the glass slide. There we can avoid trapping any air bubbles. Then we can observe the prepared slide through the light microscope. You have learned there are 3 powers: low power, medium power, and high power. Here we are only using low power to observe microorganisms. Beyond that, we don't go. So we observe the prepared slide through the light microscope under the low power. So do you know what we can observe? We can observe something like this. Let me show you. Okay. Now you can see what you can see through the light microscope. You can see that there are some circle-like structures, which we called as yeast, because we used coconut water to observe microorganisms. So what we call these, can you see my cursor? Yes, here you can see circular structures. Those structures we called as yeast. So on your writing books, you can draw what you have observed. In the next lesson, next session, I'll show you how to do this activity using a video. For now, I just brief you out it. And we have to write the observation. After doing any activity, any experiment, we have to write the observation, what we observed. So our observation is unicellular. See, single-celled, one-celled. Organisms were visible through light microscope. This picture shows you what you can observe through this after you are doing this activity. And conclusion is, I would say, I told you that we observed a fungus. Remember, a fungus, which is a type of microorganisms. Fungus under the light microscope. So, suppose that we take the coconut water and we look into coconut water. Can we see yeast like this? Can you see an image like this on coconut water? No, right? So, even though we can't see it by our naked eye, as I mentioned you, naked eye, you know that what is naked eye now? Now we can see it, but it can be visible under the low power of the light microscope. So we can conclude that the conclusion is yeast is a microorganism. When you are writing the conclusion, you have to write the whole thing. Yeast, which is a fungus, was not visible to the naked eye, but it was visible clearly under low power of the light microscope. Therefore, yeast is a microorganism. That's how we write the answers. Okay. Now, next part of our lesson. We all live in houses. We have houses. We live in house. So same as that, even though microorganisms are invisible, microorganisms also have their own places to live, the places of living. Those places of living, we call it as habitat. They have habitats on the earth. They are very tiny and they can occupy in any place on the earth. So we are specifically looking to what are those habitats. Atmosphere, air. So if you look your surroundings, atmosphere is all around you. But can you see microorganisms in atmosphere? No. But microorganisms are there. Water. In water, in previous activity, we took coconut water. So coconut water is also one of a liquid. So in coconut water also there are microorganisms. So now you can prove that. Soil. Soil also contains microorganisms. And the best example you can understand is, I told you that atmosphere contains microorganisms. So even though you were little, can you remember that COVID-19, that coronavirus was spreading through air? That means microorganisms can live in air. And then the interesting habitat is in and on living organisms. What does it mean by? I told you that living organisms are us, animals, other animals, plants, and how can organisms, microorganisms live in and on our bodies? Have you seen, probably you have seen the Dettol advertisements, Lifebuoy advertisements. In those advertisements, they are showing us on our hands, there are germs, there are bacteria, and using those soap or whatever the things, you can kill 99.99% of germs. So they are illustrating us that on our hands, hand is one of our body part. So that means we can see that on our hands, on our body, throughout our body, there are microorganisms. That's why everybody is advising us to wash our hands thoroughly before taking our meals. Then what will happen if we do not do that? We will be diseased. And inside our body, sometimes we get diseases like vomiting, diarrhea, and the doctor say that you have a bacterial infection. So how? That means bacteria or whatever the microorganisms are inside our body. That's how we get diseased. And there are some other places, some other areas on this earth, there are really extreme conditions are there. Like really hot, really cold, really salty, and having high pressure, very dark, there is no light. So even that kind of places, microorganisms can live. We call those environments as extreme environments, or else we call them as hostile environments. So let's see, what are these environments? You can see my cursor. My cursor is on a picture which you can see as an ice. So these mountains like ice, we call them as glaciers, which are really cold, and uh, people can't exist, people can't survive or live on these glaciers. But but microorganisms, they can. And the second picture is a desert. So you all have seen a desert. Uh, Desert is really the opposite of a glacier, means that they are really hot. So really some organisms can live, but us human, they can't live on deserts. But microorganisms, they can. And this is a hot spring. Hot spring means you might have heard, you might have seen springs. That normal water is coming out from springs. But in hot springs, extremely hot water is coming out, where people or any other, like even some animals will die from this hotness. But microorganisms can live. And this is the deep sea. Deep sea in the sense that you go deep down towards the sea, you can't see anything. Only the darkness is there. And there is really like very high pressure is there. Do you know the incident of Titanic submarine that was blasted in the under the sea? So one of the reasons that it faced also high pressure. Due to the high pressure, that the submarine which was made by iron was blasted. So in such a place, microorganisms can live. And this is a saline environment. Saline means the environment is very salty. In those kind of areas also, microorganisms can live. And moving on, there is a tremendous biological diversity among microorganisms. I have bolded biological diversity, the term biological diversity. Biology is what? It's a subject of what? Subject of studying living organisms. So, microorganisms also living organisms, human, some animal or animals, plants, all are living organisms. So, study of these living organisms is biology. So, diversity means every organism has their own properties, own characteristics. Even though there are common characteristics, they are diversified. How they diversified? In their morphological characters. What are morphological characters? Morphology means what you can see, the appearance. So, whenever you see a parrot, you can recognize it as a parrot. How? Through the appearance. Like that, microorganisms also have their own morphological characters, like they differ in their appearance, as well as their physiological mechanisms. Physiological mechanisms. What are physiological mechanisms? Physiology means the mode of nutrition. The mode of nutrition means what they eat. Usually they don't eat, but if we consider that how they grow, how they get nutritions, like those things, we call them as physiological mechanisms. So they all differ one from other in their morphological characters, appearance, as well as their physiological mechanisms. And let's see what are the types of microorganisms. Now, now you all know what one kind, that is fungus. We observed fungus is in our previous activity, but we'll go further into the types of microorganisms. Bacteria. The first thing we have is bacteria. And then we have fungus, yeast. But remember, not all fungi are, the plural of fungus is fungi, remember it. Not all fungi are microorganisms. Why? In the definition, I told you that cannot be observed clearly by the naked eye because there are some fungi, we can see them by our naked eye. Have you seen mushrooms? Yes, mushroom is also a kind of fungus. We can see them. So, even though they are also a fungi, we can't say that all the fungi are microorganisms. Some can be visible by our naked eye. And then algae. I'll show you a picture of chlamydomonas, which is an example of algae. And then we have protozoans. Protozoans. What are the examples? Amoeba, paramecium, and there are some other protozoans as well. Then we have virus. We'll keep virus for a little because there are some reasons why we can't consider virus as a microorganism. There are some reasons. But we consider virus as microorganisms. Coronavirus, HIV/AIDS virus. There are so many viruses. Though all those things also comes under microorganisms. But there are some reasons. We'll talk later. Okay. So the first picture is a picture of bacteria. I recommend you to search for some videos, search for some Google photos of these microorganisms for further knowledge of you. Because this is a really interesting area you can study. And then we have a chlamydomonas. Chlamydomonas is a type of an algae. And then we have a fungus. This is a fungus. We call it as mucor. Sometimes you might have seen this on bread. If you keep a bread at room temperature for like 2 to 3 days, have you seen this kind of things appear on bread? That's what we called as mucor. It can be seen on bread. And then we have amoeba. This is amoeba, which is an algae. And then we have paramecium, which is also amoeba and algae are protozoans. Those are two examples of protozoans. So I told you that we can't really consider viruses as microorganisms. The reason is that viruses, they sometimes show living characteristics, but sometimes they don't. One of the living characteristics they are showing is reproduction. Reproduction means they are generating multiples of them. That's why most of the time we get diseased because viruses are spreading. They are multiplied. But on the other hand, we can't see many of other living characteristics from viruses. So that's why we can't really say virus is a microorganism, but we have to consider virus as a microorganism. And then, okay, on your textbook also you can see this person. He was a Dutch scientist and he was the first to observe microorganisms. We called him as Antony van Leeuwenhoek. Okay, remember this name because you have to study Sometimes you can get the question, you have to write this name for your exam paper as well. So in 1674, he observed microorganisms for the very first time using his own microscope. That here you can see that we call it as Leeuwenhoek microscope. So that's how Antony van Leeuwenhoek observed microorganisms for the very first time. So I'm wrapping up the today's lesson. Today we learned what are microorganisms and the habitats of microorganisms, and we went through an activity to observe microorganisms, and then we talk about types of microorganisms, and we talk about Antony van Leeuwenhoek. I hope that you got a clear idea about this lesson. If you have any questions, you all feel free to ask. Okay, so I'm going to conclude for today. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day.